So I did change the title slightly from what's on this sheet, because you've got to know your audience. And I feel like the best way to ingratiate an audience is tell them that they're really important people. I'm going to keep this really tight. I'm basically going to be putting a button in the kind of the first session, actually. So, everything that we've heard from kind of the previous speakers, putting a button in and explaining that wider context. And ultimately why that means that everyone in here is the most important person for Britain's future. I am actually going to explain that momentarily. So, firstly, any good professional gets imposter syndrome, and having followed up the speakers previously, I need to just kind of justify why I get to stand here and explain things to you. My name is Gareth Dennis. I'm a rail engineer and writer. I am a principal track design engineer, or will be on the 1st of December. Hello to the two sister people here, if there's anyone else, come find me. But I also do lots of lecturing for the PWI particularly, but also University of Birmingham. I do lots of media stuff, yes, but also I do lots of kind of advising of campaigns and government as well. I may be a steel and concrete nerd, but occasionally that means the Houses of Parliament, where I get to tell people things about railways and why they're a good idea. It can happen sometimes, so there's something to aspire to, or indeed deeply attempt to avoid. Quick, it's going to be interactive. I'm going to try and by very best to stand still. I'm not very good at that. Who recognises this and knows what it is? Raise your hand. You don't have to shout. Raise your hand. Not many. You've seen the slides. Anyone who's been to my lecture. Oh, incidentally, this is a 10-minute version of the hour and 45-minute session I give Brian for Brian Cantor for his TED and EED. So this is I'm going to put a different version of this up. These are the Hawkins warming stripes. They represent global average temperatures every year since 1850. And they're a rather wonderful illustration of what the hell's going on when it comes to global warming, when it comes to climate change. But I'm going to come back to that momentarily, because I'm here to talk about why you're all very important. Let's talk about sustainability first. So this is a really important thing. Sustainability is dreadfully defined, like horribly defined. The Brundtland Commission Sustainable Development thing is a horrible mouthful. That's probably the most common one. I can't even say the first word. Development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. That's an awful definition of sustainability. What can you do with that? It's hopeless. My least favourite is the triple bottom line: social, environmental, and economic. The economic health is just a measure of social. Anyway, let's forget that. In this room, we like to be able to tangibly understand what the future is and how we deal with the future. And that's really what sustainability is about. It's about, will the choices we make now be the right ones in the future? And if you like, because, we like to simplify things down to their kind of simplest form so we can deal with them, it's about challenges and choices. Sustainability, the way to define sustainability is about challenges and choices. What challenges will the future bring? How does that influence my choices? So what challenges are we facing on our railway, in particular when it comes to earthworks and drainage? Well, number one, and I'm not going to talk much about this because I'm a track engineer, not an earthworks drainage off-track engineer. But shout out to everyone who was helping out up at Morpeth with when the East Coast Main Line decided to try and run off. Yes, we have an ageing asset. Mona pointed this out. It's going to be said a lot. We have an ageing asset. Lots of problems with our existing asset. It's getting older. We still don't have a perfect handle. We used to and no longer have a perfect handle on what that asset actually looks like. We're trying to get that back, but it's an aging asset. So fine, I'm going to park that. We don't need to talk more about that because everyone else is going to. What other challenges are there though? Because there's a pile of challenges going on top. There's a triplet of challenges here that I want us to think about. The number two challenge, well, I just alluded to it. It's global warming, climate change. Again, Mona wonderfully shot my fox on this by explaining kind of what the impacts are. But I want to talk. It's quite difficult to visualize why the planet warming by what seems like a really small number, 1.2 towards 1.5 degrees in the next 10 years. It doesn't sound like that much, right? Right. What you have to do is think about our atmosphere as a lava lamp, right? Our atmosphere, the planet's atmosphere, is a lava lamp. You have all these sort of hot and different temperatures and different moisture content air masses bouncing off each other around the surface of our funny little rock, bouncing around with each other. Now, if you turn the temperature up under, when the temperature's kind of low and steady on a lava lamp, those air masses are predictable. They bounce off each other gently, but it's all quite steady, predictable. You turn the temperature up even a little bit, the point at which it goes from steady to chaos and you cannot predict what's happening, the air masses split up and go all over the place, actually happens in quite a narrow temperature band. And that's what our atmosphere is currently dealing with. It's a very narrow temperature band. It's very slight change in global average, by the way, average temperatures, not kind of specific points, but annual average temperatures, which we've just been blasting through each year in records, by the way, more even than some of the more panicky scientists expected us to. This lava lamp model allows us to then understand what the impact is. And my favorite is the two on the outside, is that climate change is giving us both drought and extreme heavy rainfall, which is, as I'm sure our Earthworks colleagues and drainage colleagues will know, is the worst possible thing for that asset. We talked about the south, we talked about high clay content soils, swell and shrink. The extremes of drought and rainfall are dreadful for our asset, but also temperatures, which obviously have issues for desiccation and so on. So the term global weirding is often used actually to talk about the impact of climate on weather. Climate is just the average of all weather for 30 years. That's the literal definition of climate, the average of any given weather metric over 30 years. That's the World Meteorological Office organization, definition of climate, 30 years of whatever particular metric. And there's no better, I'm not going to put it in because, you should all have this PDF on your phone to be able to bring up very quickly. It is an absolutely spectacularly good document for all of you to have if you want to understand these detailed specifics of what those changes, those extreme changes to our weather mean for the railway. And a really important thing is, in this room, we're engineers. We think about our thing that we make, that we sit and step back from and go, that's a railway, and we kind of maybe forget some of the operational side of things. For example, I don't know, aircon systems only working up to 38 degrees, and all of our nice solid-state interlocking relying on a bunch of hard drives that melt if the room gets too hot. Things like that we don't maybe think about so much. There's some of these staff working in the rock that have aircon failing, and therefore it's too hot for them to work. So if you've put all your staff in one building, and that building is too hot because it's full of servers, your railway breaks, or you send a lot of people home who can't work. So these are things that there are maybe things that are critical for the way we run the railway that maybe we don't think of as engineers that are talked about in the third adaptation report. You can just Google it and pick it up. It's a very, very good document. And obviously there are serious impacts. When Ben and Claire and Joe and the York team and with Kate talked about this seminar, when we kind of talked about organising it, it was really important for us that Carmen was seen as the sort of that pivot point of this is how serious the consequences are and can be, and this is why it's so critical that we think about this stuff. Carmen is, and again, we talk about things that people should download and have access to. The full RAIB report on this is a critical document to have and read every word, read from cover to cover, because it talks about not just the heavy engineering stuff that went wrong, but the operational side, the challenges operationally that Network Rail in Scotland and the train operating companies, Scotland's Railway had in these extreme circumstances, not just the asset failure, but the operational challenges of all sorts of things going wrong all at once, which is what you have with extreme weather events. So that's challenge number 2, is that our asset is being battered by climate change. Challenge number 3 is that our railway, contrary to what some of our industry leaders and politicians are saying, our railway is and needs to be getting a lot busier. We need to be and should be, and indeed in parts of our network are, carrying an awful lot more passengers than we were before COVID even. LNER 130%, for example, of pre-COVID ridership. In fact, here's one I made earlier. This is the graph showing what ridership is doing. And some might say, well, that includes Crossrail. It's like, yes, because Crossrail is people travelling by rail. It makes no sense to take those numbers out. So if politicians are saying, railways are never going to recover back to where they were, tell them that they have. Yes, the patterns have moved around and changed, but actually we are at or bouncing around nearly 100% ridership, with strikes, with 50% timetables, with disruption, with all the uncertainty, with cost of living crisis, and with working from home. We're still up there. So the idea that we need to think about our railways being a smaller one is, even on the basic data, false. But that ignores the fact that we, for the future, need to be expanding our railway very, very dramatically to be driving modal shift away from cars primarily, aviation to a smaller extent, but cars, road traffic, whether it's road traffic in terms of us driving around, and far too many of us probably drove. Hopefully most of you got the train. In fact, how many of you got the train? Fantastic. That does help with Europe being very well connected. You could do this in some of the others, and I fear that some people don't. But anyway, car, but also HGVs, of course. The logistics industry just had its 15-year plan obliterated by the disappearance of a certain project that I might allude to in a minute. And the reason I put this TUC report up, which again is another thing worth getting, is because it goes through each region and it talks about the modal shift required. It talks about how much, if I go to this graph, you'll notice that cars are up at 100%. So if everyone's driving again, why are we being told as a railway that it's not going to be the same as it was in the past? It doesn't make sense. Changes, yes. Overall numbers, bigger. We need to be, you look at the northeast, we need to be increasing capacity by an additional 50%, additional 70% in some instances. Great leaps, the East Midlands, 150% increases in capacity of the rail system. That's over doubling the rail capacity of the East Midlands. This is the challenge, right? And why is that the challenge? Well, the challenge, okay, air, fine. We actually do a really good job of sucking people out of aviation in terms of domestically. LNER do a great job, Lumo and others helping, Avanti less so recently. Rail's modal share in the UK, so in terms of people and things moved, about 10%. There's a big gap on my slide, you might have noticed. It's because 89% of people and things move around on road. And the take-up of electric vehicles, firstly, only solves one problem, which is tailpipe emissions, but also it's not happening quickly enough. It is not happening quickly enough. And reducing carbon emissions is all about speed, because the slower you are to do it, the more carbon you're putting into the atmosphere. So if you do everything in true Britain style last minute, you will have put more than double the carbon emissions into the atmosphere than if you do it really quickly. So it's really key. So if you look at these numbers, okay, right. Where's Peter Dearman? Cover your ears. So if we if I snap my fingers and electrified the whole rail network and got rid of all of our other ancillary emissions overnight, that would annually save 4 million tonnes of CO2, right? If we had a 10% modal shift, just 10% from road and from air to rail, you'd be saving 10 million tonnes of CO2. Now, for me, this is an argument for electrification, by the way, because actually the whole point of electrified railway is not to decarbonise, it's to make a better railway that drives modal shift. I think all of us are sold here. This is an electrification conference, that's the point. I will, however, point out, these numbers seem nice, but what's the context here? Oh, dear. Yeah, that's because total UK transport emissions are currently about 113 million tonnes of CO2. So you can see that even that 10% modal shift towards rail is not taking a bite. So we need to be rising to that challenge and above and beyond. What's the fundamentals? GB Rail needs to double its passenger and freight capacity by 2040 at the latest. I don't think any policymakers are talking about this, but that's fine. They don't have a clue what they're talking about. Us as an industry, we're not saying this, and that's a problem. We need to be saying this, and we need to be saying this with a unified, loud, and diverse voice. Because, decisions are being currently made that mean that our rail network is not going to be able to meet that challenge. We had a plan. Okay, there's a pretty loose one that was happening kind of by accident, but we did have a plan to use new infrastructure to enhance the capacity in our existing rail network. Now we don't. So that means that, coming back to earthworks and drainage, we're going to be hammering our existing asset even harder, whether that means more trains, whether it means really dreadful ideas like increasing line speed. These are the sorts of things that are up in the air, which means that our asset is getting battered by its age, it's getting battered by the fact that climate change is walloping it, and we are hammering it with more trains. And not only does that mean we're hammering the asset, but we're giving these folk less time to go out and fix it, which is a serious issue. Access to our railway is there is not enough of it. We don't have enough access to the railway to actually keep it doing its job. That's a serious problem that there are no good answers to at the moment. So, if people ask me the question, what challenges will the future bring? My answer is, well, number one, we have an aging asset. Number two, there's a changing climate. And number three, we will have increasing traffic, and we need to expect dramatically increasing traffic. So, those are the challenges. How does that influence our choices? In what way does that influence our choices? Here's a picture from 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. There is definitely some drainage in this picture. It doesn't appear to be doing much. The choices we make, and particularly in terms of drainage and earthworks, the choices have traditionally been, we'll do that next decade. And that's not good enough. It is not good enough because our asset is not going to survive if we continue that attitude. So why are the people in this room the most important for Britain's future? Well, okay, so I referred to 130 million tonnes of carbon a year. This is the graph of equivalent emissions by sector transport is now the UK's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's no longer, all of Britain's savings have been from switching off coal power stations, by the way, and having LED computer screens instead of cathode ray tube. That's basically all the savings. Transport has not changed in my entire lifetime. Our carbon emissions from transport have stayed static my entire life, since I was born. It's rubbish. And pictures like this, which is the slide that I get most angry about in my lectures to our diploma sort of candidates, is this is ostensibly a brand new bit of railway. Okay, it's in the route of a former railway. This is the railway dropping down into Winchborough Tunnel, Edinburgh-Glasgow line. And brand new, fantastic, this is a good picture for thinking about railways as a system, by the way. Fantastic new precast pour with lovely Vossloh clips, fantastic. It's in a puddle though, and there's a train stopped in it. This is a dysfunctional railway, and people will know why did this happen? It's because someone at some point went, oh, take drainage out of the scope. If you hear someone do that, close call them, shout to them again, and then send them this slide. Because fundamentally, absolutely fundamentally, the reason why all the people in this room are the most important for Britain's future is because without functioning earthworks and drainage, there is no railway. It's as simple as that. There is no railway, and the UK fails to reach net zero. That's it. It's as simple as that. That's why you're the most important people in this room. Thank you.